Hello there, and welcome to the latest edition of Live Music and Me, the music podcast where we get some of our friends to come on and talk about their gig memories. Today's guest is the Scottish singer, songwriter, musician, John Douglas, who's recently released a cracking solo album and, of course, is part of the iconic Scottish group, the Trashcan Sinatras. Hope you'll enjoy this one. All the best. Hi, John. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing great. How's yourself?
Not bad, sir. Not bad at all. Are you ready to do live music in me?
Yes, just give it a go.
Let's give it a go. Fingers crossed we'll get there. Okay then, so in no particular order, the first gig that you went to.
Well, this was a bit foggy for me. When I was, it seems a long time ago. First started going to gigs when I was about, I think maybe 15. Um, is it travelled because there wasn't many gigs locally. I'd have to come up to Glasgow. So I was born in Irvine and brought up in Irvine. So that's a good 25 miles outside the city. And I first started coming up around about the punk times, 79. I first started coming to shows. And for years, I thought the first show that I saw was Gary Numan
Right.
at the Apollo when he was, it was his first British tour and it was the first date of the tour and he was the number one single at the time, the Our Friends Electric record.
Great
But I
record.
recently went on, it's a great record. It's a great gig, actually. I was kind of up in the, not the stalls, the one above the stalls. So I was kind of looking down on the stage, and the first act was orchestral manoeuvres in the dark.
All right. Really good.
And the curtains were shut, and there was a little a reel to reel tape recorder in front of the state the curtain, and then they came on with the keyboards and the bass, and they played their set. And I think this the Electricity was out, the
Hmm.
first single. Didn't really know much about them. And then the curtains parted, and there was these big towers with lights, and Gary came on, and it was great. I loved that first uh, Gary Newman album. Actually, it's good at the time. But I looked at the Apollo website, and it seems as though I'd been to a couple of gigs before that, which I don't really remember. And the first one was, with Stiff Little Fingers in the kind of late summer of '79, and I was kind of their first record is a crazy record. I mean, back then there was a lot of trouble. You know, the troubles were going on in Ireland. So for a young bunch of young boys to be singing about it in a kind of very, very good, very, very poetic way, but the records are it's almost ugly. The music, it's really, really
Hmm.
horrible sounding guitars, but they had good tunes and that sort of punk spirit. And I was going to see anybody that passed through town at that point. Me and my pals would get the train up to Irvine and go to the Apollo and
Yeah.
yeah, Stiff Fingers, and they were supported by the Star Jets. So they're probably the very very first thing I ever saw. There was a local band called the Prisoners,
Right.
and I must have been about maybe 15. It was my pals' big brothers were playing in the St Mary's Church Hall, just a little kind of wooden room, but the noise and the excitement. They were kind of playing sort of punky material as well, and it was just this hypnotizing thing. It blew my mind, just to be in a room with that sort of volume of music
Hmm.
and to see people making it themselves. It wasn't a fair record. It was pretty mind blowing.
Yeah. So you thought it was Gary Newman, but it was probably Stiff Little Fingers or the Prisoners before
I
that. Yeah.
was the local band, and the
Local.
Stiff Little Fingers was the thing. I paid a ticket. I'd went
Yeah.
out of town to see.
Perfect.
Right.
Perfect. Not a bad first gig either. Okay. The last gig that you went to.
The last gig I went to see was Bob Dylan at the Hydro.
Ah, wow. So
That was
jealous.
pretty
So
amazing.
jealous.
I've got my wife's sister works for the promoters, so we managed to we didn't get guest lists because I don't think Bob does them, but we got some tickets, a couple of tickets set aside for us, and I've been to see Bob Dylan a few times, but it was pretty spectacular. First of all, because his last record, uh, Rough and Rowdy
Hmm.
Ways, he kind of played the whole record. And generally, when I've seen him in the past, he's usually got a new record out and maybe play one or two from it, and then it's always stuff for the catalogue. But this time he was just playing the whole new record, and it was very moving.
Hmm.
He's quite an old, frail fella,
Hmm.
and nature of the hydro. It's quite intimate, for a big place. It's quite wide, so no matter where you are, you're not very far for the band. And it was just a really kind of. Most of the songs were kind of hanging in the air. They had a drummer. The drummer was rarely hitting the snare. It was all kind of cymbals and sort of just this groove that was going on without the drums. And there was pedal steel filling up a lot of the space. And there's two guitar players there who normally, these guys could tear the roof off if they just wanted to.
Yeah.
But they were very subdued. They were very laid back. Now and again, you get a little thing where they'd show the sort of power. But it was just a very restrained show, and everything was on the lyric and his singing. And some reason, a pal of mine said to me that he did a lot of Frank Sinatra covers. He did a few albums.
Yep.
They said that ever since then, his live diction's got better. He's much more aware of what he's singing lyrically, kind of thing. So it felt like that. It was like being in a room with Shakespeare or something. You could hear every word. And the elderly voice as well, I find that very moving.
Yeah. It's a lot of guys like him and Johnny Cash and guys like that. Their voice just got better, didn't it, as it got older?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that even the Sinatra stuff, when I listen to his sort of stuff he did in the 70s, it's much more moving than the kind of earlier sort of young. I suppose at the height of his popularity, I suppose.
Yeah.
But something about the aging process. I think maybe it's me as a listener getting older. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I found old Bob singing very, very emotional.
Fantastic. Okay, so a gig that most surprised you, good or bad?
What did I write for that? See, I did a wee thing. Yeah. Oh, I went to see Willie Nelson.
Right.
Me and the missus went to see Willie Nelson. It must have been 15 years ago or something at the concert hall, Glasgow.
Okay.
And Willie Nelson, you're in the hands of a genius. Been a showman forever. You're going to get anyone that's been on the road that long. You're going to get a good show, whether you like the songs or not. But Willie, it was a bit of a treat. He rarely comes to town, so we went to the gig, and it was great. But now and again, the drummer would be murder. He would be like doing things. You'd go, what the heck's he doing? And you'd see some of the band sort of glancing at him, but Willie was just dead ahead singing, oblivious to it all. And because I know me and the missus, we kind of know folk. We ended up backstage kind of after the show, and we got chatting to some of the. No, we never got chatting to Willie. I did meet him at another time, I'll tell you about. But
okay.
We got chatting to some of the road crew, and I'd had a few drinks, and I said, "What is it with the drummer? What's the sketch with him? He's rough." And the guy says, "I know." Says, "But he did time for a while, so he's got the gig."
Very good.
Somewhere, and he sort of took the rap. Oh, it's my stash. Sorry, man.
Yeah.
So he got whatever it was. He was in the jail. So Willie stood by him. So I thought the gig was kind of weird for that, but that story sort of made my night. Oh, fantastic!
Yeah, that's payback indeed, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. It's country. It's something really, really brilliant about that. We met Willie Nelson on the road once. Me when the Trashcans were touring back in the day. We it was sometimes you take a day room in a hotel. You just to go in and get a shower, and for 3 or 4 hours, and then split. And we were doing that. We'd got one room, so the 5 of us were there. And somebody was in the shower, and Davey, the bass player, went downstairs to have a smoke or something. And turns out Willie Nelson's bus pulled up. They were doing the same sort of thing,
right?
And Willie came out, and Davey said to him, "Hey, what are you doing?" Willie, and shook hands. And Davey happened to have in the room a copy of Stardust on CD, the original thing. He said, "Willie, would you come up and sign my Stardust CD?" And so he came up to the room, and we were all sitting in the room, and the door opens, and Willie Nelson walks in. Frank comes out the shower, and Willie Nelson's in the room. I didn't really know what to do. Jaw hit the floor, and we just sort of shot the breeze. What you doing? Where you playing?
Yeah.
Nice little chat. Left, and we said we were gigging that night, and he left and said, "Okay, good picking tonight, guys," and wandered off.
That's brilliant.
So that was a little, really nice fella.
Brilliant, fantastic. Okay, the first gig that you went to with a partner.
That's one I couldn't.
Too far back.
I was trying to think what you meant. I suppose. Let me think. When me and one of my girlfriends, one of the first things we did was we went to the Reading Festival together in a tent, and it turned out it wasn't a very good idea. Normally I suppose before that I'd be going to gigs with my pals,
Yeah,
and I'd never been to a festival where I ended up staying over. So that was about. This is before I was before we were touring and stuff, and it was rotten. The weather was murder. I didn't have the right sort of, you need some sort of inflatable thing to protect you from the roughness of the
yeah,
ground. Didn't have any of that. It was like sleeping on the ground,
yeah.
and the weather wasn't good, and we didn't have any. We didn't have any material to take us out of it. It was just kind of just very sober, and the bands weren't very good. I can't even remember why we went. I think we might have got tickets off somebody.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was probably not a great not a great experience.
How did that affect the relationship?
We were all right. We survived. We didn't. We run it together. It was good. Both of us
Yeah.
were sort of on each side. It was like, fuck, what have we done? What have we done here? That was my one and only experience as a festival punter.
Right.
Never again. Never again. And
Okay.
to go as an artist, very different experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back
I bet.
to the bar, you get food and all that, and everything's sort of, you can get in and out.
Yeah.
Yeah, not for me, that sort of thing.
Okay. I enjoy festivals, but you're right. There's a kind of perseverance that you need. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're well prepared. We definitely weren't well prepared.
Yeah. I saw Pulp at Transmit this summer.
Oh
Um,
wow.
which, talk about, I'm not a Transmit fan really, but I had to go and see Pulp again. So
Aye,
you did the same
fantastic.
thing, and we were very lucky because Paul Heaton was also playing. So we had Heaton sort of halfway through, and then we had Pulp as the headliner. So you just had to put up with
Good.
the rest of the 14-year-olds swilling around you. But it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Okay,
Yeah.
a gig that you had a ticket to but missed.
I had a ticket. I've probably still got it somewhere. I had a ticket for the Smiths at the Queen Margaret Union,
Oh,
and they must have been touring for their first record or something. And again, it was just been down in Irvine, and I had the ticket. It was one of those times where you buy the ticket months beforehand, and for some reason something happened, and financially I couldn't get the train up to the city to see them and back. So it was like, at the time I was like, oh, I'll see them next time. Not really that bothered.
yeah,
And I did. They came to Irvine actually a few years later, and they played at the Magnum, and I went to
yep.
see them in the what was it? Shakespeare's Sister, I think it just came out.
Okay,
They were on the
good.
road quite a lot, those guys. But yeah, the very first show, and some of our pals went and said it was amazing.
Mm,
And I've since been in that venue, and it's a great venue to
yeah,
see a band.
yeah,
I love the
very,
little balcony things as well.
very
I
good
think back
venue.
then it might have been. I think back then it might have been a worry because you had to get signed in by a student,
Yeah,
even if you had a ticket.
yeah.
And I think that might have been in the back of my mind as well. Like, I've got this ticket, but there's this doubt that if I go all that way, I still might not get in. If the students, you could maybe meet somebody or whatever, but
Yeah,
it was a risk,
yeah, get that.
and yeah, very
Yeah.
strange. I don't know if that's still the same these days. I don't
I
know.
don't think so. I've been to a couple of uni gigs, and no, I think you're okay now as long as you got a ticket.
Aye,
And at
aye.
least you saw
But
them.
I did see them, aye,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And what about on great bands then? What about a bucket gig in the past that you wish you'd been at?
Well, again, similar sort of thing beat from being down in Everett. Frank Sinatra at Ibrox.
Right.
I really
I
wish I'd
remember
been.
that.
That's kind of in my lifetime the only time he's been in the country, anywhere nearby. For some reason in my head, I just thought, yeah, he's not. It's not going to be good. I was young. I was only in my kind of late 20s or something. It never really. I thought, oh, it's going to be. His voice will be gone. It will not be any good. And me and my pals went out, and I can remember walking in Irvine for the turf, down to the Crown, maybe about 8:30 at night, and thinking, I should be in, I
Should be
should be
there.
in Glasgow. Like,
Yeah.
25
Yeah.
singing. And of course, next day there was reports of. I've heard a few tales since. There was issues like with the punters getting in. Some people were getting sent to the wrong area.
Right.
Some gates weren't open in time, so there was the audience were quite late in arriving. He went on stage, and people were still coming in. And somehow he clocked that there was issues, Sinatra, and he ended up. He would take. He'd one of those radio mics. He came down off stage and was going up into the crowd and sitting beside women and singing to them.
Right.
On the stairs. Just making it a bit of a night for everybody. And I heard later that he'd spent the afternoon playing poker with the guys that set up the stage. He said that's some habits in town. He gets the local guys and he sits and plays poker with them.
Yeah.
But that's one, and he did all the great ballads that I love, and yeah, that was a real kick. I've still kicked myself for not doing that.
Yeah, I never saw him. My mum and dad were at that gig. Yeah,
There you go.
yeah, yeah. I remember them coming home, John, and telling us all about it and stuff. And I loved Sinatra, but I was quite young at the time. But even then, I remember them saying how good he was. So yeah,
That was the one. There
well,
you go. That's great. You're brilliant.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, then what about this is quite an interesting one. What about the best support act that you've ever seen?
Well, this is a kind of more personal thing. It's a band called The Apartments. I don't know if you've heard of them.
No,
From Australia.
no.
It's mostly one guy, Peter Walsh. He used to be in the very early days of the Go-Betweens. He was one of them. I don't
Okay,
know if you know the Go-Betweens.
of course. Yeah, yeah.
Well, he's got a similar sort of take on song, very sort of lyrical and melodic. He's got an interesting voice. It's quite unusual. I find it really hits me. I think he's got quite a soulful voice. And I'd never heard of them, didn't know anything about them, didn't even know who they were. And I went to the Barlands to see Everything But the Girl when they were touring like their second or third album. I'm not quite sure. This would have again been 80s, 85 or 86. And this band were supporting them. And didn't know a thing, but they played and they sort of blew me away. I thought they were fantastic. And I watched the Everything But the Girl gig, and they were all right. Actually, they weren't as good as the Apartments.
Okay.
Well, some sort of anyway. So after the gig, I kind of left, and before I left the Barlands, I thought I better go to the toilet. So I got a wee walk to the train. So I went out to the toilet, and then on the floor in the toilet, leaned against the wall, was a copy of the Apartments' first album. Somebody bought it at the merch store and just left it.
Okay.
So I grabbed it and took that home. I've still got it in my collection, and I listen to it now on streaming. But that kind of I just fell in love with them. Great band. The guy's still going. Peter, I'm kind of in touch with him actually over the past few years. He's kind of been very friendly online. I got in touch with him and told him my story about how I first saw them and how I first. It made him laugh. He got back to me and said, "You remember that tour very well." And it seemed sort of apt that I got the album in a toilet. Some sort of Facebook pals. And he comes to Europe now and again, but he mostly plays like in Paris and Germany and these kind of places. But you might have heard them. This Mortal Coil, the 4AD album.
Of course. Yeah, yeah.
It's one of them. There's one of his songs. The same album that's got the diary. There's one of them covers. I can't remember who it is who sings it. That covers one of his. But yeah, The Apartments. I'll go
and check that out, John. Thanks. Yeah, I remember this Mortal Coil stuff. That was really good. Okay. What about a gig that made you miss the last bus or train home?
Well, this is something I never did.
Okay.
I had to get. No way I could miss it. In my big gig going days, basically from 15 to about 17 or 18. That's when I would go.
Yeah.
To whoever train up for. I think it was about £4 return. The trains back then, and they were every hour for Irvine to Glasgow. And the last one left at 10:30, and I think on the weekends it would leave at 11. So some of the gigs at the Apollo, I would have to leave and run down to get the train. But there was no way I could miss it, because if I was stuck in Glasgow, it'd be frightening, to be honest. My mum and dad are from Govan, and they moved in. But for me, all I knew was going up to Glasgow was going up with them to my granny's, which was pretty rough and ready at the time.
Yeah.
We would go to a corner shop and it'd be quite almost like what you'd see Belfast was like on the news. There'd be burnt out motors.
Yeah.
you know, rough guys hanging about, quite a scary thing. But going to gigs, that's when I started. The first time I went up to Glasgow on my own, well, with my pals, just going to gigs, and we get the train, you come out the station, go up Renfield Street, and you were
Mm-hmm.
in the gig.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like kind of safe, kind of all right. I do remember one time though, going up to see the Stranglers, and they'd shut off Renfield Street because the Stranglers had a reputation. They'd been banned
Right.
for playing. This was their first gig back
Yeah.
after being banned, and they'd shut off Renfield Street, and there was police horses, cops on horses, sort of this queue of wee punks. I was one of them, just kind of doing Renfield Street, and this queue of police on horses across the road. And every now and again, they would just come across and lift somebody.
Yeah.
And they would say it's because you've got a sweary word on your jacket, you're getting lifted. And I think back on that now and think, what a horrible thing. Wee boy going to a gig
Shocking.
door, he's nearly in, and he's like, next thing he's away, and he's ridiculous. And the gig was great, but the councillors were in a box. The Glasgow councillors were in a box to sort of police the show and make sure nothing untoward. So of course they were getting pelters for everybody, and
Yeah.
the band were sitting up there, the idiots that banned us the last time. So that was the thing about going to Glasgow. It was quite a scary sort of thing. So the thought of being stuck in Glasgow for the night was not on the menu. It's like, I don't care, I need to get the train back. So I never really missed. Had to stay overnight in a bus station anywhere.
Ken McCluskey mentioned on his chat that he slept in a bus station in Ayr town centre, coming back from, I think it was the Ayr Pavilion. I think he was at a gig at down there.
Right,
yeah. So he said never again. You can imagine. So. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So we mentioned a bucket gig in the past that you missed. Have you got a bucket gig that you're still hoping to go to? Anyone that you've not saw yet that you'd like to see?
Oh, I couldn't think really too much. I mean, to be honest, it'd be the Trashcans. I'd love us to be back playing a show again. It's been a while since I played. And
perfect answer.
There, a couple of guys live in the States just now, so it's very expensive to get us in the same room. And touring, it's just quite a financially tough thing to do for a 5-piece band. But I live in hope, and we can still make records, and we're kind of making the records just now. And you never know. Ideally, in an ideal world, we'd be on a stage somewhere. So that's kind of
like that.
If I was name something that I'd like to see, it'd be us.
Okay. Well,
me
looking around, seeing your pals. Well, I'll make sure I put that call out when we put the podcast out, mate. Okay. I'd like that. Okay then. What about a gig that you travelled the furthest to get to?
The one thing that sprung to mind initially was, there's two things. One is, when I was 18, I kind of headed off to London for a few years, and I lived away out in Wandsworth, which is kind of, quite a trek, quite a walk for the city. And I went and had tickets to go and see the Clash at the Lyceum. Right. This was, I don't know if you know much of the Clash history, but there was a period where Joe Strummer went missing.
Went to France or something, didn't he?
France, I think ended up it was a bit of a scam. Basically, tickets weren't selling. So that ended up, oh wow, and suddenly they were out of the press and all that. But before that, they started the tour with 7 nights at the Lyceum, and I went to see them there. And I walked to the gig, which was a good hour and a half for Wandsworth, and I walked back. That seemed like an eternity at the time, walking through London and through the summer. But later on, I remembered there was another gig. Me and Frank went down. We travelled down for Kilmarnock to see Prince at Main Road in Manchester. We just got a car. And I just got a car, and somebody, I don't know how we managed to get tickets. It was just, I think the Love Sexy album was out, Alphabet Street.
Oh, great album.
Oh, that's brilliant. And it was, at that time it felt as though he's not going to be around. He's not going to be touring. Not got much chance to see. He wasn't coming to Scotland. So we drove down. Frank drove, with this big estate thing. I remember. And he went to the gig, and it was before there was big screens, so it kind of felt like it was ages away. You couldn't really see. Yeah. It was just a light show somewhere in the distance. You could hear the sounds, and it was great. The music was great. It was a bit flat because we just couldn't get anywhere near the stage. And then we drove straight back. Probably
Okay.
get back into 4 or 5 in the morning. I think so.
Yeah.
That was a bit of a trek.
Yeah, no, that's a big, yeah, that's a big try. I saw him at Parkhead actually. It must have been the tour after that. I think he played Parkhead.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah,
Should have
so if
waited
you'd
to
wait,
that.
if you'd waited, yeah, absolutely. Okay, what else we got then? So the band or artist that you've saw the most?
Hmm. I couldn't compare. It's between a few people. Well, the Jam. I saw the Jam 3 times. So the Clash a couple times. But I think the one there's a band called Micro Disney.
Uh-huh.
The, a singer called Carl Coughlin, who's in a few band. He was in a band called the Fatima Mansions as well. And over the years, I've seen them. He's passed away now, sadly, Carl. I got to meet him once briefly. But yeah, Micro Disney, I saw them a good few times, and also I saw the Fatima Mansions. So he's probably the guy I saw most. Quite a confrontational singer,
Right.
very literate, very politically aware, very kind of surreal as well, lyrically. I first heard them on John Peel, and they did these beautiful sort of melodic songs, quite weird, sort of chordally. And he did this gorgeous sort of baritone and singing it. He comes to Cork, so his brogue is quite strong, and his accent to tune in. And when you tuned in, the lyrics would be just kind of surreal, but really intelligent and really poetic. And then he would do these sort of spoken word things halfway through songs where he just start chatting about something. And I just find the whole thing totally engaging
Hmm.
and intriguing and kind of unusual. We've never heard anyone sort of doing that sort of thing. And for some reason, he was very prolific and was touring all the time and bringing out loads of records, and they were all equally as interesting kind of thing over the years. So he was a guy I followed from the day I first heard him until he passed away, which is probably a good 30, 40 years. And over the years, I always sort of checked in whenever he was doing stuff and
Right.
going to see them live. And it's one of those characters you'd have loved to see grown into an old fella. You know,
Yeah.
like we're saying about Dylan and everybody that's a prolific artist, they get more interesting to me as they grow older,
Yeah.
especially people that have got pen and are good with a lyric.
Yeah.
You know, anybody that gets to an age, there's always a good wisdom in there and a good sort of wit going on. And he had a lot of that. And I'd have loved to have seen him become an older fellow and do all that. But not to be, but you know, he shone bright. And I
Yeah.
saw him.
And you saw
Saw them when they were
and you saw him a few times as well, which is good.
a few times. And his element. I think live was where he became the full version of what he was. Brilliant.
Oh, okay then. What talking about great gigs then, what would you say is the best gig that you've done as a performer?
What did I write down for this? Well, there's the ones that lived long in the memory. Was the first tour we did. We started out of America. Before that, before we toured America, we hadn't really played live a lot. We played local gigs. Maybe got out a little bit further in Ayrshire. Then we started making records and we started doing like support shows for other acts. And you always felt as though you were in rooms with people that never heard you.
Yeah.
And you were sort of you make an impression. Now and again, you do a headline gig, and there'd be a few people there, and other people were just coming along to see what the sketch was. You never ever felt for a while as though you were in a room full of friends. It was always sort of okay, we're going to war here. You know, we're going to try and have a victory, and it was very nerve wracking. And then we went to the States, and the only reason we went to the States is because a record was getting played over there, the first album. Lots of people bought it and
Yep.
get played on the radio. It became quite a part of people's lives. So we went over there, and suddenly we were in rooms where everybody knew every word. Glad to see us, intrigued with these exotic foreigners with their crazy accent, as well as the songs. You know, so suddenly you're being embraced. It took a little while to adjust, but once we did, as the tour went on, it just became really enjoyable. And one of the last shows in the tour was in New York at CBGB's, which is now shut.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You know, it was a place that I knew as kind of folklore, one of these
Yeah.
great little spots in the world where genius came out of.
Yep.
And it was grubby and shabby, and you know, it came from skint. All the stuff that came out there seemed to come from skint folk. You know, people that were
Yep.
of similar life to ours. You know, scraping by, you know, playing whatever they could get their hands on, but very creative. So to end up playing in this little place was very, very special. and it was like a multiracial kind of crowd as well. And we actually played a couple of news. We were getting new songs on the boil at that point. We did a cover of a Spanish Stroll in tribute to the New
Okay.
Yorks. That kind of went to. So that was a very memorable show. And the other very memorable show was the last one we played at Oran Moor, but
Right.
the last one we were all in town. I think we played. It was quite a long set, but we played a lot of stuff we hadn't played for years,
Yeah.
as well as newer stuff. And the very last thing we did was at that show. For a while, we'd been Davey, our mainstay bass player, hadn't been in a touring band for a long, long time. He got a day job and a family and stuff, so he couldn't commit to around. So we had a guy called Frank Devana, an American, helped us out on the bass. So he'd been playing. Frank was playing us for years. Great player and really good. And he was at this. So that was the lineup for the Oran War show. It was us, the original members, and Frank playing bass. Frank Devana playing the bass. But Davey was at the show.
Right.
So the very last song we played that night, we got Davey up to sing because a song on our record, our album, our second record, the song on that called "One at a Time," which is a big kind of loud rocker type thing. But the vocal is Frank sings a line, Davey sings a line, Frank sings a line, Davey sings. We'd never really played it live that way. Frank just sung the whole song live. But for this show, we just thought, right, Davey's in this, let's get him up and we can do that thing. Because he doesn't have to play the bass, he can sing. So that was the last thing we did. Davey come up and did his thing for the first time. So that was the last show we played as a 5-piece, and it had all the original members on stage, and we played just stuff from our whole catalogue kind of thing. It was very sort of, and the crowd were brilliant. You could tell everybody was glad we were there, and they were so overjoyed that we were playing stuff that we hadn't played for a long time. And a lot of fun.
Yeah, I bet. How many years ago was that, John?
Oh, you're asking. I don't know. It was well before lockdown, 4 or 5 at least.
Right. Okay.
Maybe
I knew
6.
I knew it was pre-lockdown. I wasn't sure when. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably a few years before.
Might not be the last, John. Of course.
I think it's crossed that. Yeah.
Fingers crossed, mate. Okay. Yeah. A couple of finish. So talking about venues, then great venues. What's your favourite live music venue for a gig?
There's been a few to play. There's a place in America and Los Angeles called the Troubadour. It's got a kind of rich history. It's a really old venue. It's wooden. It's like it could easily, you could film a cowboy movie inside it. It looks like an old type thing, and it's got a lot of history. A lot of the kind of like Tom Waits did his first shows there.
Right.
They had a kind of open mic night. The open mic night, that would be A&R people would show up, but and he got he did early shows there. Elton John, I think, did his first shows there when he went to America, and I think the reviews of that shows led to him, opening a lot of doors.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was John Lennon when he was on his last weekend with what's her face,
May Pang and Harry Nilsson.
Aye.
What about as a fan then? Favourite gig venue?
The Barrowlands. Barrowlands. Mile, by a country mile. The Apollo had its charms, but that's all gone now. And there's something about the first gigs you go to that you can never beat. In that era where I was first going to see bands at the Apollo, I was like 16, 17, and the volume was big and the music was energetic and it was street music. There's everything sort of is secondary to that. But to go see a band anywhere in later years would be the Barrowlands, just because of it's unchanging, it's family owned.
Yep.
It's got the old dance hall history. There's a bit of kind of spookiness about it. Where it is in the town as well, it's not high street, it's round the back. But the sound is great. The attitude is great. It's not like health and safety everywhere. Of course it's safe and all that, but there's jumping around, there's beer flying.
Of course there is, yeah.
It's a proper raw gig. I went to see, talking about Dylan again, I managed to get tickets to go and see him when he played there. Recently, relatively recently, maybe even 10 years ago, he was playing at the SECC for 2 nights.
Yeah.
But he had a day off. He's known for, if he's got a day off, he'll go and just do a gig somewhere locally. So they booked the Barrowlands, and word got out, and I managed to get tickets. And you could tell the band were finding the whole thing hilarious because the crowd are right there for a start, right up in
Yeah,
their faces, jumping, beer flying everywhere, and singing. And they hadn't played anywhere like that for a long time. It's always the big Enormo Dome that they've been playing, so they were laughing their heads
yeah,
off. That's right. Dylan was he was laughing as well, and he's going, "You guys can sing, you guys can sing." Him saying things for us for anything was a joyous thing. But
yeah.
just to watch these guys suddenly be landing in an old school rock and
Mm,
roll wild night and seeing them loving it was
mm.
just a beautiful. That lives. It still lives long in the memory of that. They're such a great night, and yeah, the place is hard to beat. Hard to beat.
Yeah, yeah, I find it hard to argue with that. It's been a favourite, to be fair, of quite a few of the guys that have come on. So, and quite right too. So,
Yeah.
okay, takes us to a couple of toughies to finish, John. So, the best ever gig that you've been to?
Well, I mean, I'd have to say the Clash. Just as London Calling came out, I went to see them. They were playing 2 nights at the Apollo. I mean, I was young, so the memory's hazy. I remember buying a bootleg of it a couple of weeks later at the bars, and it was just such a weird thing. They started with Jimmy Jazz, which is a kind of unusual thing, but
Yep.
again, they seem to play forever. But it's the spirit of the thing and the songs they had at the time. They were fresh, and I was just a kid jumping around in darkness to this
Yeah.
amazing music. Uh,
Yeah.
and it still stands up today. Every time I hear anything off that record, I puts a smile on my face. It doesn't sound dated, it just sounds joyous and celebratory kind of thing. So yeah, that's probably the most the biggest gig in my life.
Hmm.
That really
Hmm.
brought things to life for me.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. And one to finish then, one live album that everyone should own a copy of.
Well, this is a kind of toughie. There's a
I
few that I
know.
love. I really love. I love the Thin Lizzy Live and Dangerous record.
Hmm.
Since I was a kid, that's very special bunch of songs and great. Just the atmosphere of a show really comes across. What else was there? Uh, there's a Van Morrison record live at the Belfast Opera House
Okay.
that I really like as well. It's mostly his kind of uh, late 70s, 80s kind of stuff on that, and it's a funny. There's funny sort of musical things on it, guitar sounds on it, great. But the spirit of the thing, he's on fire and he's having a ball, and it's really well captured. So I'd say that. There's a few others. There's a record called Total's Return. I don't know if you know that. It's The Fall. It's like their third,
Mm, mm,
third album, something, fourth album. I kind of fell in love with him very early on. My
mm.
brother had a copy of Totally Wired, and it blew me away. And the B side was good as well. And then I bought their live record. It was the first of their albums that I bought. I didn't even know it was a live record. And it turns out it was. It's a funny record. It's like a compilation of things. There's a couple of studio bits on it, but they toured working men's clubs
Mhm,
in the 19. This would be like 78, 79.
mhm.
Bernard Manning, lad, real mainstream, hardcore minor crowd, tough. And they were in playing this quite confrontational music. And there's times when you can hear on the live record he's sort of giving the crowd a hard
Yeah.
time. Some guy shouts something and he says, "Are you doing what you did 2 years ago? Don't make a career out of it, pal." Just slagging off. Slagging off the band. He's gone, the drummers did something, he's gone, "Come on, stop showing off." And this is all on the record.
Yeah.
It was a real eye opener to what you could put on a live record. I'm listening to this thing and I'm getting scared listening to it.
Yeah.
Just the music's a bit like that as well. They're quite a kind of scary. The lyrical aspect is really scary at times. He's brilliant sort of storyteller and conjurer up of atmosphere. But yeah, I'd say I'd recommend that. I suppose out of them all, I'd recommend that. Total's Return by and Fall. It's a mental,
Perfect.
crazy record. Quite
But
brilliant.
it's not one live album, but they're three very different ones. So we'll let you have that. All right.
Okay.
Fantastic, John. That's been great, mate. Really enjoyed that. And thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Tom, man. Thank you.